Next Pats podcast is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Our first Next Pats specific episode post-draft. Hopefully, you've been following along with the Patriots Talk / Next Pats episodes that we did after the first round, after the second round, and earlier this week to wrap up the entirety of the draft. But you know, we're diving deeper on all of these players that the Patriots selected and what it means for the Patriots roster moving forward here on Next Pats. That's what we will be focused on for the next not only several weeks, but the next several months, and I'm sure into next season as well. It's a great time of year. We already have some phenomenal interviews lined up for you. We've got one today. The great Cory Yates from Real Analytics is with us to talk about his company, the technology that he's using that the NFL is dipping into, how it can help teams scout players coming from lower levels, cough, cough, Marte Mapu, and what it means for the Patriots that they were able to draft Marte Mapu, number 76 overall in the third round. Fascinating pick, fascinating player, somebody we're going to spend a lot of time on over the course of the next couple of months here. But great to have Cory on because he was able to scout Marte Mapu himself at the NFLPA Bowl. He quickly soon thereafter got the call up, Mapu did, to the Senior Bowl, lit it up at the Senior Bowl. We'll talk a little bit about Marte today. I think he is, in terms of the value picks, the first three picks, day one, day two picks that the Patriots made, he's the guy that we really know the least about. So we'll talk about him a little bit today with Cory. We'll hit that interview at the end of the podcast. We're also going to talk a little bit about their number one selection, number 17 overall, Christian Gonzalez, the corner out of Oregon, why he's a fit and why his pick signals a changing opinion at the cornerback position for Bill Belichick. Fascinating discussion there. And then we're going to get to some questions as well. We've got a hefty mailbag, phenomenal questions from the Twitter sphere this week. So we're going to try to hit as many of those as we can in this week's episode. But let's start with Christian Gonzalez. Hopefully you can go over to NBCSportsBoston.com and read my most recent piece on Gonzalez, on why he slipped to number 17 overall, why he is not Bill Belichick's ideal, or at least his old school ideal at that position. And third, why that doesn't matter. Let's start with why he slipped. Having spoken to a number of NFL coaches who spent time with Gonzalez, who studied him closely this offseason before the draft, personnel people as well who did the same, I can tell you one of the primary concerns with Gonzalez is the physicality with which he plays. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am scouting Christian Gonzalez and that I am looking at every snap he played over the course of his, I believe, 30 starts, both at Colorado and then at Oregon, and can give you a well-rounded evaluation of who he is as a tackler and what he is in terms of being an NFL caliber hitter. That's not me. Okay. I'm not going to be able to do that kind of deep dive. The people that I've spoken to, though, have. And the question that arises with Gonzalez, and it's one of the reasons why teams believe that he slipped to where he did when he was projected to be a top 10 pick by just about everybody in the media space, right? Daniel Jeremiah, who's really accurate in terms of figuring out who's going where and which players are deemed most valuable by the league. He had Christian Gonzalez as a top 10 player. The 33rd team, great website, phenomenal work they do over there. Matt Castle is now a part of their crew. He does a great job, of course, with them, but they are led by, in terms of their draft evaluations, former NFL GMs. They had Christian Gonzalez as a top 10 player. You want to go the analytics route? Go over to Sports Info Solutions, who I reference on the podcast all the time. I use their work in my work, my written work on NBC Sports Boston all the time. They had Christian Gonzalez as a top 10 player. So what happened? And the answers I got were fascinating. Some teams flat didn't know, and I'm texting them in real time as the first round is happening. Why is Gonzalez still on the board? And you get a shrug of the shoulders from certain clubs. There was one team I reached out to, an NFC defensive assistant who spent time with Gonzalez, who watched him closely, whose team was in the cornerback market early in this year's draft. And I was told this: good kid, athletic ability off the charts. Biggest issue is tackling and just overall being physical. And I followed up and I said, is he just not a good tackler in terms of his skill set? Is that just technique that he needs to tweak? Or is he not willing? And the answer I got back was not willing, period. End of text message. Now, that doesn't sound like your traditional Bill Belichick corner. And we went over it in depth on the podcast, on the website, during the pre-draft process. What did he tell his scouts in 1990, 91, 92 with the Cleveland Browns? Daniel Jeremiah relayed that to us. He wants, number one, tackle and force guys. And when he listed the issues you could have at that position, the problem areas, number one was, you guessed it, tackling. He wants tacklers at that position. He's wanted them for a long time. We had Devin McCourty on the podcast just a couple weeks ago, right before the draft, who told us, yes, you need short area quickness, lateral quickness is how he described it. You need long speed now to run with these receivers in today's game. And you need to have the aggressiveness to be willing to tackle. Again, according to the people I've spoken to, and that one text message that I just read to you jives with what I had heard well before the draft, which is watch Devin Witherspoon and watch Christian Gonzalez. Devin Witherspoon is 5'11", 184 pounds. Christian Gonzalez is 6'2", 200 pounds. But only one of them plays like he's 6'2", 200 pounds. And I get it. Witherspoon is exceptionally aggressive. He is exceptionally physical for that position. It's why he went, part of the reason why he went number 5 overall to the Seahawks. He also has great instincts. He can play the ball in the air. He can lock you down in man-to-man coverage. He does a lot of things that had him at the top of the list at that position for a lot of teams. Gonzalez isn't the same type of player in terms of his on-field demeanor. That's just how the league viewed him. And it wasn't just that one team that I just read you that text message from. That is an assessment that has been deemed fair to me by a variety of people in a variety of roles. And I can tell you there are even some people in Foxborough who look at it and say, yeah, no, he's not the most physical guy at that position. And again, doesn't jive with Bill Belichick's traditional wants and needs and wishes at that position. But I'm here to tell you, Bill Belichick taking Christian Gonzalez where he did is a sign that he doesn't care. His opinions have evolved at that position. And I shouldn't say he flat doesn't care. Of course, he wants everybody on his defense to be able to tackle and to have that aggressiveness, to be able to make a hit when you need it. And maybe Gonzalez has that. You know, Devin McCourty was on with us for Quick Slants this week. And he said what he loved about Stephon Gilmore was regular season, you might not get the full Gilmore when it comes to physicality. But playoffs, when you need it, that's when he's willing to hit. And that's what Devin McCourty says is what Christian Gonzalez has to bring. It doesn't have to be Brandon Browner out there on the outside, lighting people up like he's a linebacker. No, but when the playoffs come, we need you to get some bodies on the ground. I think that willingness to shift is key. And I think that was the right move on the Patriots' part because Christian Gonzalez is a rare athlete and he has rare coverage ability and the ability to look past, not outright ignore, but in some ways look past the level of physicality that Gonzalez displayed at the college level in order to bring that physical skill set into your building. Right move. It's part of the reason why I would give the pick an A+. I told you right after the draft, that was my grade for the pick. That hasn't changed. Even after talking to people about this, and people may hear me right now and say, man, you're killing the kid for not being physical. I'm not. That is just not one of the most critical parts of playing that position. I'm sorry, it isn't. And so for Bill Belichick to be willing to budge and choose Christian Gonzalez over another first-round caliber corner, by the way, who does bring some different physicality to the football field in Maryland's Deonte Banks, that to me speaks volumes about what he cares about at that position and his evolving opinions at that position and understanding that the most important thing at that position is the ability to lock down, to cover, to be able to match up with players on the other side who have real size. Huge, huge value in that. And if you're not the best tackler at your position in the NFL, that's okay. You know, what I've been told is, quite frankly, the Patriots don't ask their corners to be tackle and force guys anymore. It's 2023. It's not all that important anymore. Again, you need it occasionally, but when you can cover the way it looks like Gonzalez will be able to, and the way his physical skill set would suggest that he can, that's what matters more. And I go into real detail on my piece on NBCSportsBoston.com about just how rare his physical skill set is, Gonzalez is. And I'll lay out just some of the details for you right now. But I love playing around. You know this by now if you've listened to this podcast. I love playing around with Kent Lee Platt's relative athletic score. He's at MathBomb on Twitter. If you're a fan of the draft, odds are you already follow him there, but does a phenomenal job of accumulating all of the athletic testing, pre-draft athletic testing, heights, weights, speeds, combining them and coming out with a score of 0 to 10.0 that tells you that player's quote-unquote RAS. Christian Gonzalez was a 9.95. One of the highest that we've seen. A freaky athlete at over 6 feet, ran a 4.38 40, had a vertical of over 40 inches, had a broad jump of over 11 feet. You don't find many guys like that. And you don't find many guys like that who also have the tape, the football IQ, the intangibles, whatever else you need to be deemed worthy of a first-round pick. Right? Straight up track athletes with nothing else don't get taken in the first round. So you know Gonzalez is more than that. And as a matter of fact, just to give you further detail and some historical comps, there's only 7 corners that have been drafted in the first round the last 20 years, 2002 to 2022, who had an RAS, a relative athletic score, of 9.9 or better. And I'll give you the names here. Darrelle Revis, Byron Jones, Marshawn Lattimore, J.C. Horn, C.J. Henderson, Patrick Surtain II, and Patrick Peterson. Some pretty good names in there. That group accounted for 21 Pro Bowl nominations and 8 first-team All-Pro nods. The first-team All-Pros were Revis, of course. Patrick Peterson, of course. He had 4. Revis had 3. And Patrick Surtain II just came up with his first. Now, you look at guys like Surtain and Horn. Horn's actually bringing that group down when it comes to the All-Pro nods and the Pro Bowls, right? He hasn't had one yet. But I would say he's going to get one. I feel pretty confident in that, given how he played last year, came off an injury, suffered as a rookie. Great talent at that position. One of the best young players at that position in football. And Patrick Surtain, he's only going to rack up more and more as the years go by. Pro Bowls, All-Pros. That's the level of athlete that we're talking about with Christian Gonzalez. He belongs in that category. Again, there's only so many. That's over the last 20 years. 9.9 RAS and a first-round pick. Okay, but I actually broadened my search in terms of historical comps and relative athletic score in my piece online. And I actually made the RAS cutoff 9.70, just so that we had a little bit wider breadth of examples of great athletes taken in the first round and what they ended up doing in the league. You still only have 15 corners that fill that criteria. 9.7 RAS, first round pick between 2002 and 2022. Of the 15, 12 made at least one Pro Bowl. That's 80%. 80% of the guys in the first round that had a 9.9 score or better made the Pro Bowl. That's a hit. Okay? You have some guys in there like Jason Verrett, who ends up getting injured and doesn't necessarily, live up to his pro potential. That's just one example. But the only 3 who haven't made a Pro Bowl from that list are C.J. Henderson. He's actually the only one on the list who didn't have a season yet, or hasn't yet at least, had a season as a plus starter in the league, according to Pro Football Focus. So whatever you think of their grades, if you don't have a grade of 70.0 or better in any given season, then you haven't been a quality starter. C.J. Henderson's the only one, because the only other 2 that haven't yet made a Pro Bowl are J.C. Horn, who I already mentioned, and Bradley Roby, who's a really solid player at that position, premium position in the NFL. Longtime starter, has been on some really great defenses. Again, of that freaky 15, let's call them, 9.7 score, last 20 years, first round pick. Of those 15, 9 were named to either the first or second team as an All-Pro. Stephon Gilmore is a part of this list. Darrelle Revis, obviously, who I mentioned, has an argument as the best corner of his generation. Gilmore, the only player at the position to win Defensive Player of the Year since Charles Woodson. And then you have Jalen Ramsey, who's a part of this list as well. Okay, he just missed the 9.9 RAS cutoff for the 7 players who were taken in the first round that I just mentioned. Basically all hits outside of CJ Henderson. Jalen Ramsey is also on this list. 3-time first-team All-Pro, one of the best defenders in the modern NFL. Okay, so you get that combination of the tape and the athleticism and the NFL deeming you a first-round pick. That usually works out pretty well. That's Christian Gonzalez. Again, you can go to the piece for more detail on that, but that is why I feel so strongly about this pick and why I am, if I was a Patriots fan, encouraged by what the Patriots did here. By looking past the whatever evaluation you have maybe made on him as a relatively unwilling tackler. And of course, there's all sorts of clips online of him and all sorts of tape on him making tackles. I would say saying that he's not willing to tackle is a little unfair because we have seen it. It's not like he doesn't do it. But okay, relative to others, you want to say that? That's fine. Good for the Patriots for looking past that and seizing on the traits that could make him a great cover player. Now, maybe the physicality part of it is why they passed on him at 14, why they didn't trade up for him. He was one of the players that I said would have been worthy, of a trade up. Not only did they not trade up for him, but he gets all the way to 14 and they trade down. And maybe they had a great idea. I think they did with the Steelers taking a tackle and Broderick Jones. Good for them in that regard. They knew the Jets, in all likelihood, weren't going with a corner there because they already have Sauce Gardner and they're really well set up at that position. The Commanders are the one that they couldn't have been completely sure on. Now, I've been told intel throughout the league was pretty good that they loved Emmanuel Forbes. But I think that was under the assumption that they loved Emmanuel Forbes with most of the league expecting that Christian Gonzalez wasn't going to make it to them at 16. What I've been told was Darnell Wright or Emmanuel Forbes for Washington. And if the Patriots felt strongly that they were going to take Forbes over Gonzalez, Forbes, for instance, the better turnover player. And the Commanders have had a hell of a time trying to create turnovers over the last few years. But could they have been sure that Gonzalez wasn't their guy at 16 when they were looking at corners? That's a little more difficult. So the Patriots had to be comfortable with potentially losing Gonzalez when they made that deal. And maybe the physicality aspect of his game impacted his grade in such a way that it dropped him to a level with guys like Keon White, who I know they were considering at number 14 overall. And it's part of the reason why they made that trade down, because they did have multiple players at other positions. I think there's reason to believe that Nolan Smith, the edge defender out of Georgia, would have been part of that conversation at 14 as well. But they end up getting their guy, looking past the physicality part of it and valuing the traits. Good on them for it. A+ pick. Stand by that. All right, let's get to some of your questions now. Again, tremendous mailbag submissions this week for Next Pats. Let's roll through them. Our guy, Monsieur Fouché. I want to say, I should know how to pronounce your first name. Is it Hugues? Let's go with that. I should know that. If I'm going to flex the French pronunciation, I should know how to do that. Let's roll with it anyway. Love the back and forth on Twitter. Let's roll with it. Hopefully you can correct me if I need to be corrected on that front, Monsieur Fouché. He asks, with the draft behind us and the second wave of free agency coming, who are the possible fits for the Patriots? Suggestions via trade or free agency, especially at the skill positions. Well, I think we can always list DeAndre Hopkins, right? Even though now he's come out and said, I didn't necessarily ever want to be traded from Arizona. And Arizona obviously has not yet moved him. I would say let's just keep that name in play. I'm keeping the Jerry Jeudy name in play as well. And I know Ian Rappaport tweeted recently that the Broncos picked up his 5th-year option and that locks him in and he's part of their plan. That may be true. But the act of picking up the 5th-year option by no means locks him in as part of their plan for the long-term future. If anything, it may make him more tradable because now he has 2 years on his contract as opposed to 1. And yes, that second year is at a higher number, but it is still relatively manageable if you view Jerry Jeudy as something close to a number one receiver. Or if you're just a team that values offense in such a way that you'd be comfortable paying $13-ish million to a number two. Picking up the fifth-year option does not lock him in long-term. You know what locks him in long-term? A long-term contract with a massive, massive signing bonus that the Broncos can't get away from. This does not mean that Jerry Jeudy will not be traded, in my opinion. Now, maybe Ian has intel where the Broncos are telling him, oh, we're not moving this guy. The only reason we haven't signed him to a long-term deal is because his wants are off the charts and we just can't meet him at this time. So I'd be willing to accept that. But picking up the fifth-year option in and of itself, no. He's still very much a tradable commodity, in my opinion. But let's look at running back, because running back is one area that I thought the Patriots actually might address. This is a deep running back draft class. You had pass catchers, you had between the tackle runners, you had 3 down guys that were going to go day 1, day 2, day 3. The Patriots did not come away with one. Now, we'll talk. There's a question later about some of the younger options that are already on the roster. But in terms of free agents, listen to these names: Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, Kareem Hunt, all still available. All the ability to catch the football. And I'm focused in on Leonard Fournette here because I know they were interested in bringing him to the Patriots last offseason. And if they had, Damian Harris probably would have been out the door. Now you lose Damian Harris as a free agent. To me, there's a bit of an opening there. Ramondre Stevenson is your number one guy. You have Kevin Harris on the roster. You have Pierre Strong on the roster. Neither of those, to me, are giving you the combination of power and explosiveness that Damian Harris could. You get the speed option, Pierre Strong. You get the power option, Kevin Harris. If you could meld those two together, that to me is something closer to Damian Harris, or maybe Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette also gives you, again, that ability to catch the football, sort of an all-purpose guy. The question would just be, how much is he willing to sign for? Because the Patriots aren't flush with cap space necessarily. They're not right up against it either. I believe, according to Over the Cap, they have about $8 million in effective cap space. So could you bring on Leonard Fournette? I think you could. I'd also be looking at Foster Moreau at tight end. I know he's dealing with a cancer diagnosis. And hopefully, I'm sure we're all hoping that he gets through that the way that he's hoping. But he is available, and if they feel as though he has the ability to make a full recovery, and again, we all hope that's the case, this is the kind of tight end that they need. This guy will block. He has the ability to catch. He's a tremendous athlete in his own right. We know they've been willing to invest in a player going through something similar in the past. They spent a 5th-round pick. Again, the level of investment is a day 3 pick. You could shrug your shoulders at it, but they spent a 5th-round pick on Marcus Cannon when he was dealing with his cancer diagnosis. Foster Moreau is available. That's a position of need, in my opinion, not for the here and now, but for the future. Both Mike Gesicki and Hunter Henry going into contract years. And then on the defensive side, free agent still available. Trey Flowers still has connections to the area. Patriots are in touch with Flowers. I'm not sure how great a need that is after they got their 2nd-round pick, Keon White, to play the edge. But he's one. Akeem Hicks, another old buddy, who I still think has some explosive power to play on the interior. If you want somebody who can play the run and you could keep in on passing down, say Christian Barmore, you're not sure how healthy he's going to be able to stay. If you could get Akeem Hicks at the right price, I like that signing. And then Daron Harmon, again, another former Patriot, but somebody that you know can play free safety. You still haven't received or invested in a true one-for-one replacement for Devin McCourty. Daron Harmon at a lowish is what I would expect kind of number would make some sense to me. All right, Coach 007 is asking, do the Patriots view Mapu as a linebacker? City Sal, their 4th-round pick out of Eastern Michigan, at guard or tackle? The answer to all of those is yes. So Mapu projects to me as a strong safety, similar to your Kyle Duggar, your Adrian Phillips, your Jabril Peppers. I would just say this, though. Based on the kind of athlete that he has real range. He has real striking ability. He has the size to be able to get a tight end, get a running back on the ground. Let's not completely rule out a move to free safety for Marte Mapu out of Sacramento State. Really smart. That's what I'm told. Really smart. big hitter, versatile. This is somebody who, in the right sort of situation, I think could get by as a free safety, as one of the last lines of defense for Bill Belichick. Now, would you put him in the post and would you make him the last line of defense? I think I'd feel better about it if you were using more too high sorts of schemes. But let's just keep that in mind, and let's keep an eye on where he's being used in the spring and summer. Okay, let's not rule that out, because I do think he's so versatile and he's so explosive. Does he have the range? I actually asked a defensive assistant what he thought about Mapu. This is somebody who actually coached Marte Mapu at the Senior Bowl, so got to spend some time up close with him. And here's what he told me about the potential move to free safety. And again, reiterate some of the concerns that I just expressed. Maybe. It just depends on how they want to use him. He'd be more of a box safety or a spy for athletic quarterbacks on third down. He played linebacker, nickel, and safety at Sac State. I'm not sure he has the range to be a deep safety in the NFL. I've talked about how the Patriots are considering using John Jones at that spot. Jalen Mills would be a logical try at that spot as well, because he has the experience playing safety in the Eagles defense. Do any of them have the combination of enough size to be able to, again, get some of these bigger bodies on the ground? That would be the one issue I would have maybe with Jonathan Jones. Not that he can't get them on the ground. He definitely can. This guy hits. But are you asking for trouble in terms of longevity with Jonathan Jones, in terms of injury and availability with him, if you're asking him to be cracking these tight ends going down the seam over and over and over again? Because he will play with reckless abandon. Devin McCourty's shoulders are a mess, I think he would tell you, in part because he had to make those types of tackles over the course of his career. Now, he's not the biggest guy either, but he is bigger than Jonathan Jones. With Jalen Mills, do you have that? Do you have that toughness quotient that you need to play that position? And does he understand every piece of the Patriots defense the way that he needs to in order to be sort of the quarterback of the defense? John Jones has that. I'm sure Marte Mapu doesn't at this point, but could he get there? As smart as he is, he has the size. I don't know if he has the long speed, but he has the size, and I think the football IQ to eventually maybe fill in as a free safety. So it's just one to keep an eye on. But he's 220 pounds, so yeah, you could use him at that linebacker level. Do the Patriots view Kyle Duggar as a linebacker? No, they view him as a safety, but did they use him as a linebacker at times? Did they use Patrick Chung as a linebacker? Adrian Phillips? Yes, all these guys play at the second level. I think sometimes we get caught up in specifics of labels, positional labels. This is positionless football. It's positionless defense, right? So if you see Mapu at the second level and he has assignments in the run game where he's got to cover a B gap, is he not essentially a linebacker at that point? Now, when it comes to Sidy Sow, again, both guard and tackle. Give you some flexibility there. He played the vast majority of his snaps, and he had a long, healthy career at Eastern Michigan. But he had 1 year as a starter at tackle. It was all the way back in 2018. Not a ton of experience there. Doesn't mean he can't do it. And I think they should try him at tackle, because some depth there would be good, especially after drafting an interior guy in Jake Andrews and an interior guy in Antonio Mafi. I believe they'll try Sidy Sow at both. And we'll do a lot more on Sidy Sow. Really interesting player. He's sort of an analytics darling in some ways. So we've got some fascinating numbers to throw at you at a later Next Pats date. Let's get to our guy, Trygve. Again, love the back and forth on Twitter. Hopefully, again, I've made the right pronunciation there. He says, thank you. Great work covering the draft. Thank you. I was surprised with the Boutte pick, but good value in the 6th. Any insider knowledge about how his interview went? Would you have taken Downs in the 3rd? That's Josh Downs, the receiver out of North Carolina, or Boutte in the 6th? Good question. And this sort of syncs up with the next question here. This is from Used to Be Chico. Not a question, but a suggestion. You really dig into the draft each year. I think it would be interesting for you to do a real-time draft each year, writing down who you would pick right before the Patriots make the selection. It would be fun to look back and see how you did in comparison. Okay, let's meld these together, and let's try to come up with a Next Pats draft, given where the Patriots picked and the selections they made. I think this could be fun. And I know we're not doing it in real time, but let's keep track of these and see how these players shake out. We have not done this before, but I think it's worthwhile to do this. Number one, I'm sure some of my selections, if not all of them, will look absolutely ridiculous in the near future, never mind the long term. And any chance to poke fun at ourselves and not take ourselves too seriously, we will do that here. I know, very big of me. Congratulations to me. But also, just sort of a fun exercise too, and keeps us familiar with these players and where they've ended up and the roles they might fill, whether it's with an AFC rival or a potential free agent signing down the line. It's one of the reasons I love covering the draft in depth, is because 4 years from now, a lot of these guys will be available and I'll already have a decent idea of who they are, what they can do. You have 4 years backlog information of who they are in the NFL, and that of course will matter more, but at least you have a starting point. So at 17, I would have gone, or here's the other thing. I'll just make this disclaimer. I'm not going to project trades that weren't made because there's so much that goes into those. The Patriots may have been dying to trade up in the second round to take, for instance, Matthew Bergeron, the tackle out of Syracuse, or Jonathan Mingo, the receiver out of Ole Miss. They weren't able to. They didn't. Whatever the reason, I'm not going to try to project and put my own trades in here. I'll just make a selection wherever the Patriots made a selection. All right? So here we go. 17 overall, give me Christian Gonzalez. 46 overall. Now, this is where I would have considered a trade up, but they don't do it. I'm not going to do it. The two picks that went right after 46 are really interesting and interesting Patriots fits to me. Jartavius Martin, Quan Martin, from Illinois, and Cody Mock, the offensive lineman, I'll call him. He tried, basically all 5 positions at different points over the course of the pre-draft process, from North Dakota State. I'm actually going to go with Keon White here as well. I love the fit. I love the pick. I gave it a B+, and the only reason really it was a B+ was because they weren't able to trade up. Again, and I'm not sure everything that went into that and whether or not they were able to. You could look at all the ammo they had and say, well, you should have been able to pull something off there, and you'd have an argument. But they didn't, so I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to stick with Keon White. I'm thinking about Cody Mock because I love the athleticism, and I would try him at tackle, but it seems as though the entire league views him as a guard. And so maybe the Patriots would view him the same way. I don't want to guard in the second round. Give me the edge defender. So 2 picks. I'm in lockstep with the Patriots, as uninteresting as that is. Let's go all the way down to 76. This is the Marte Mapu pick. Josh Downs, again, the receiver out of North Carolina, is interesting. Tucker Kraft, the tight end out of South Dakota State, is also interesting. This is where I want to get a receiver because this is where I start to be concerned that I'm not going to be able to get one. And I feel like even at this stage of the draft, 3rd round pick should have a role for you right away. I'm willing to bet on some upside here and hope that I can seriously improve my team at a critical position like receiver in a year where there aren't that many in the draft that you feel like have the ability to do that. I'm going to go with the receiver out of Stanford, Michael Wilson. He ended up going at 94. So that's almost 20 picks later. Okay. So I'm sort of putting my neck out there for Michael Wilson. Tucker Kraft, I love. And I think if it was just best player available for me at this spot, he would be somebody that I would seriously consider. But again, I want a receiver here. And if I wait too much longer, I'm not going to get one. So give me Michael Wilson. Got some injury red flags, but he made a visit to the Patriots. Great releases at the line. He's not the fastest guy in terms of straight line speed, but a very good athlete in terms of his relative athletic score, an elite athlete. I'm going to bet on him. Somebody that Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, compared to Devontae Adams in terms of his release package. I think he's a savvy player, did not have great quarterback play at Stanford, not a great offense there at Stanford. Again, dealt with injury. If you can keep him healthy, I think he's a player. Give me Michael Wilson at 76 overall. Now the Patriots, we're into the 4th round here. Again, might have been a good time to trade up. Get Nick Saldiveri out of Old Dominion, can play some tackle for you, can play some guard for you. The Saints did that, at 103. I'm not going to do that here at 107. I am instead at 107 going to go with Carter Warren, the tackle out of Pittsburgh. I had one offensive coordinator tell me his tape was better than Darnell Wright's and Broderick Jones's, which I find a little bit hard to believe, but that's how he feels about Carter Warren out of Pitt. I think there's some personality stuff that you might have to be willing to deal with. with Warren. He dealt with injury at the end of last year. I think if he hadn't been dealing with that, maybe you see him be a little bit higher option as sort of a developmental tackle. But I think he could be someday, and the Jets are certainly hoping the same. They took him at 120 overall, that he could potentially be a starting tackle in the league. So give me Carter Warren at 107. Now we're right back up again here with the Patriots at number 112 overall. At 112, this is where I'm going to invest in the interior of my offensive line. And I'm going to go with John Gaines II out of UCLA. Tremendous athlete, tremendous short area quickness, times that have him in a similar category to guys like Joe Thuney. Okay. And when you look at his mockdraftable.com spider chart, John Gaines is a really impressive athlete for the interior, can play a variety of different positions. He's smart. He's coming from a varied run game at UCLA. Give me John Gaines over the kicker, Chad Ryland. Now we're up again at 117 overall in the 4th round. So I've addressed both the interior and the tackle spots on my offensive line. I've addressed receiver, I've addressed defensive end, and I've addressed corner. I'm feeling pretty good about my draft right here, and I should be just going with whoever I feel like has the most upside for me at any position. I would say receiver included, which is why we're considering Next Pat's friend of the Next Pat's podcast, Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. Speed to burn, interior guy, explosive, so sort of your T.Y. Hilton type, where you play him in the slot and you let him run deep. I'm actually going to try to climb into Bill Belichick's brain, and I'm going to make a pick that I feel like he would be happy with based on what he has wanted historically at this position. We're going with another, Oregon Duck. This is the 4th round. It's well before he came off the board, but I'm going to go with Noah Sewell, brother of Penei Sewell, out of Oregon. He's a linebacker, 250-ish pounds, and you might have to be on him about his weight, but I've talked to linebackers coaches about him, and they feel like he has more upside than Jack Campbell, who went in the 1st round. Now, again, he dealt with a number of different defensive coordinators. I think, and what they think, and what they've relayed to me, is it maybe made him slow to trigger at the college level. So reading and reacting, understanding what he's looking at. But if you can get him some consistent coaching, and you can stay on him about his weight and about his eating habits and get him in the right nutrition sort of program, I like Noah Sewell in the 4th round as being sort of your next to take over for Jawan Bentley whenever that has to happen. But somebody to play alongside him with some real athleticism. He has the nice combination of being a bigger body, but also being a real athlete. Again, Jack Campbell tested like a great athlete. Noah Sewell's a good athlete as well, is my understanding, and has the ability to be more than what Jack Campbell already is coming out of Iowa. But I've been told he's a great kid. He'll be a pro, even though, again, there was that little bit of a quote-unquote weight issue at Oregon. My understanding is he'll work hard. He'll put his head down, as his brother Penei has since getting into the pros. And he's really young. He's really young, and so there's some upside there with Noah Sewell. So he's my 3rd, 4th round pick. Okay, now we're into the 5th round here. This is the Antonio Mafi spot. This is where I'm going to go with safety Daniel Scott. This, to me, could be a true free safety in your defense. Stood out at the Senior Bowl. Really good athlete as well. He's out of Cal, so we're really heavy on the Pac-12 here. Stanford, UCLA, 2 guys from Oregon, and now we've got a safety out of Cal. How do we feel about that? I don't know. I'm not necessarily the world's biggest Pac-12 fan, but I like Daniel Scott as a free safety in the 5th round. Let's move on down to the 6th round. We know the Patriots were loaded up on 6th round picks. Hopefully this part of the podcast is not putting you to sleep, because 6th round picks, I mean, let's be honest. Who needs them? Just kidding. This is a fun part of the draft. The Patriots, with their first 6th rounder, took Kayshon Boutte. That's where I would go with Chris Rodriguez, the running back out of Kentucky. Really hard runner, and somebody that I think could spell Ramondre Stevenson. If he ever had to miss time, you'd feel comfortable with Chris Rodriguez on 1st and 2nd down. Would you use him on 3rd downs? Probably not, but I'd feel comfortable with him there. Number 192 overall. This is where you get your punter, right? No, I'm going to stick with Corliss Waitman. I'm probably not going to take a punter in the draft here, although Behringer, I think, is the best punter in the draft, is what I was told. And listen, I think he's going to do a fine job for the Patriots, so I don't hate that pick. But this is where I would make another run at a receiver, honestly. And I know you've got a bunch on your roster already, and that's how they look at it. Are these guys that we draft, are they going to be able to beat out who's already on the roster? but I'm thinking about the future, and I'm trying to strike gold at a position that matters. So I'm going to go with A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest at this is going to be pick number 192 for us. He actually went at 195 just after the Patriots took Bryce Behringer, the punter. So I've got A.T. Perry and I've got Chris Rodriguez in the 6th round. My next 6th round pick, that was where the Patriots got Pop Douglas. And I do like that pick. Good for them investing in a little bit smaller body player there. Instead of Pop Douglas, I'm going to make a run at Zach Kuntz, the tight end out of Old Dominion, one of the freakiest athletes that the Combine has ever seen at that position, and that is not a joke. I'm just going to roll the dice. It's the 6th round. Take a shot on a great athlete, and I'll go with Zach Kuntz there. And then the next 6th round pick was Amir Speed, special teamer. I know he's listed as a cornerback. He is probably not going to be playing defense for the Patriots. He's going to be a special teams guy. That's where I'm going to go, and I'm going to get Kenny McIntosh, the running back out of Georgia, because I do think he'll catch the football for you. I think he has all-around kind of ability. So now you've got Kenny McIntosh and Chris Rodriguez 1 year after you took Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong. I just look at Pierre Strong. I'm not sure he's going to be able to be that third down back. And I'm not sure, and maybe it's Ty Montgomery. I'm not sure Kevin Harris is on the roster next year as a 6th round pick last year. So I'm taking a couple more cracks at that running back position at this stage of the draft, because you do want to be built around your running game to a degree. The Patriots do, because Ramondre Stevenson is one of their best players. I think you need a little bit of depth there. And then with the last pick of the draft, Isaiah Bolden. That's who the Patriots took at 245 overall. I'm going to go with Moro Ojomo. Sort of a 3-4 end is how he would fit in the Patriots scheme out of Texas. Shrine Bowl guy, really strong for his size. I think he could actually get a little bit more weight on him. And to me, he did actually make our prototypical Patriots list as an interior defender. So let's go with Moro Ojomo there. All right, fun exercise. Like I said, let's do that every year. Why not? And we'll try to figure out where we went wrong, where the Patriots had it better than anybody else, given the picks that they made. Maybe the special teams guys really knock it out of the park, and I will have egg on my face for not taking a punter or a kicker in my fantasy draft here, but that's okay with me. I'm willing to accept that. All right, a couple more questions here. Matt Ryan says, Matty Ice, though they were 6th round picks, are you expecting more out of Douglas and Boutte than we ever got out of Wilkerson? I guess I would hope so. Christian Wilkerson wasn't a draft pick. So these guys are draft picks. I'm not sure either of them are on the roster. That's the nature of being a 6th round pick. But I do like the potential for both Boutte and Douglas. Douglas, again, your explosive interior option. And Boutte, I think, is a pretty movable chess piece. And our guy, Greg Cosell, feels like Boutte, when he's right, looks a little like Stephon Diggs. I mean, if you get anything close to that, that's a home run pick in the 6th round. Nick Van Hoof says, what do you think the Pats starting O-line will be week 1? I feel like there are 4 obvious ones, and then either Riley Reif or Calvin Anderson, and I hope it's Anderson. I think it's going to be Riley Reif. Now, I'm not sure left tackle or right tackle. He played right tackle last year. Vast majority of his career is played at left tackle. Obviously, Trent Brown can play both spots, so some movement there between those two, but I do think it'll be Reif with Anderson as your swing guy. And then the 3 interior people we know, Cole Strange, David Andrews, and Mike Owenu. Andrew Sheehan says, which rookie makes the biggest impact in year 1? It's got to be Christian Gonzalez. He's going to start at corner for you. In my opinion, he kind of better. 17th overall pick. You need somebody who's going to start at that spot. Are we not a better team, says Brian Lee, than Mac's first year in 2021? Improved defense, special teams, with Bill O'Brien and Clem coaching on par with Josh, and Parker/Gesicki as upgrades over Aguilar/Jonnu. We might get back to a top 9 or 10 offense DVOA EPA, which we were in Mac's first year. I agree with all that. I think the one issue is, I think Josh McDaniels is a great offensive coordinator. And so we'll see. We'll see it at how the team functions. You have a new offensive line coach in Adrian Clem. So we'll see how all of that works out and marries up and comes together for the Patriots offensively. Those would just be my questions, but I do think they should be improved. Now, does that mean 10 wins like they had in 2021? I think the division's also improved. I think the conference has improved. The schedule looks difficult. So this is something we talked about with McCory and Quickslants the other day. They've gotten better. Have they improved enough to get to where they want to be? Jim Fournier asking, is there any chance moving Strange to left tackle, similar height and weight as Matt Light? Great athlete. And it's a good question, Jim. What I'd heard when he was drafted was he gives you some center flexibility. and they tried him at center. The Senior Bowl did leading up to that year's draft. But I know they viewed somebody like Logan Mankins as being able to play left tackle. They just never really needed him out there because they had Matt Light, because they had Nate Solder. And so their best offensive line was with Mankins at guard. You know, if they really need a tackle, can Strange do it? I'm not sure, but it would be worth a shot if it got real dire. Let's say that, given the options that they have. Nick Drake, is there any sense at this point, if the Patriots have 6 to 8 wins next year, that Bill Belichick is at risk? 6 to 8 wins, yes, I would say Bill Belichick is at risk at that point after not making the playoffs 2 out of the last 3 years. Mikhail says, will the Patriots offense be simplified successfully so that receivers can comprehend it without bringing in ex-quarterback or needing years of study? Good question. It didn't sound that way. We talked to Juju Smith-Schuster the other day. You can see my story on NBCSportsBoston.com. This guy's studying his ass off. So is it so simplified that he can just come right in? He's a veteran now and roll? Doesn't sound that way. Didn't sound all that simplified to me based on what he was describing, but we'll see. Joey Bats, do the Patriots keep 6 receivers? If not, I see Boutte getting a redshirt year. Douglas should make this team no matter what. That is strong, Joey Bats. I like Pop Douglas as well, but that is strong. 6 receivers sounds like a lot. Parker, Bourne, Thornton, Juju Smith-Schuster, and I think there is probably room for one more. So who that is it Boutte? Is it Douglas? Is it somebody else that's not on the roster yet? We'll find out. Would like to know Coach Scar's opinion on moving players from guard to tackle, says Scaps, and vice versa. Scaps, I will direct you to our last podcast with Scar on Next Pats here, and he does talk about that. He talks about tackles in college moving into guard, and he assumes everyone can do it. Or everyone, I should say, assumes that that player can do it. Scar says, wait, hold on a second. It's a little different in there now. You know, the speed of the game, I think, is a little bit different. The twists, the games, the stunts. I think the tenacity in there, the grit that you need to play in there, I think is a little different at times as well. So he is not somebody who views every tackle as being able to play guard, but he does view some guards as being able to play tackle, as I just mentioned with Mankins, who's a special case, but he would not rule that out if you were to ask him. Chewing gum with Lloyd Braun says, if Washington had taken Gonzalez at 16, who do you think the Patriots would have taken at 17? Keon White, Deonte Banks, other? I think Keon White, I know Keon White was in the mix there. I think Nolan Smith was probably in the mix there. Because I have already resigned myself to the fact that it would not have been JSN. It would not have been JSN. I can tell you that. I don't believe it would have been Deonte Banks, although I do think the Patriots viewed him as a first-round pick. That sounds like parsing words, but I think if the Patriots had somehow moved back farther into the first round, they viewed Banks and Forbes, for that matter, as first-round corners that they would have been happy with. Original Swagmeyer, how many draft picks make the team? And does a UDFA make the cut? Let's just say one makes the cut, because one makes the cut just about every year. How many draft picks make the team? The first 3, I would say all 3 fourth-rounders. So that's 6. And the punter, that's 7. Let's say at least 7, Swagmeyer. Clarky 57, talk of moving Sau to OT. What are your thoughts on that? I think it's possible. We'll talk more about his athleticism later. And then John says, why didn't we trade up with our 4th and our 3rd and a couple more 4ths to get a receiver? I get it. The Mingo one, especially to me. The Falcons, what they did in the second round was they traded 4 and 110 to move up and get Matthew Bergeron. Okay. So that got them all the way to 38 overall, right at the top of the second round. Now you could have sent number 46, so a little bit lower than the Falcons' second round pick, and number 107, so a little bit higher than their 4th round pick. If you look at the charts, it's not quite as many points as the Falcons gave up. So you would have had to add in a day 3 pick to get to that spot and trade with the Colts. That pick came from Indianapolis for the Falcons to move up and take Bergeron. But you could have packaged 2 or 3 picks there together, in my opinion, instead of coming away with double-digit rookies in this draft that was not viewed as all that deep. Could have packaged 2 or 3 of those picks together and maybe moved all the way up to 38. And instead of the Falcons taking Bergeron, maybe you take Bergeron, try him a tackle, or you take Jonathan Mingo. That would have been the route that I went. Guys, thank you so much for all the questions. Awesome mailbag. Love chatting with everybody and love the back and forth. And we wanted to try to get as many of these as possible as we could into this year's into this week's, episode. Let's get to our interview now with Cory Yates. He is the co-founder and CEO of Real Analytics. We're going to talk Marte Mapu. We're going to talk about Real Analytics, how the NFL is using it, what it means for the NFL moving forward. This is the type of technology that they are more and more coming around to. And so not necessarily every corner of the league is going to be latching on to something like this. And the analytics averse, they may be slower to grow analytically as some others. But Cory and his team, they are picking up some steam here. Let's just say that. And he had some fascinating things to say about Marte Mapu and his experience with Marte. So let's get to Cory Yates right now. All right, very excited now to welcome into Next Pats Cory Yates. He is the co-founder and CEO of Real Analytics. Cory, thanks so much for being with us here on Next Pats.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
So, Cory, I first want to ask you about your company, Real Analytics. It's fascinating to me. I can read the very short description that's on your Twitter bio. It says a sports tech and data company that analyzes video to measure athleticism so coaches can evaluate talent more accurately. I love this idea. I love some of the clips that I see on social media of some of the players, for instance, who were just drafted, because I feel like this is relatively easily accessible in terms of if you have the video, then maybe you can get at this data that your company then produces. But tell us more about Real Analytics and how NFL teams might be using the information that they can get from Real Analytics.
Absolutely. So we are an AI-powered sports tech company, but the secret sauce is really in the data that we're generating from analyzing the video. So most fans are familiar with next-gen stats, right, where they're tracking how fast a player ran. They're tracking things like throwing window and everything you can imagine. What our company does is very similar to next-gen stats, only in that we're not tracking players through wearable devices. Our technology is actually tracking the players through computer vision technology. And so what that allows us to do, it allows us, to be able to track players without the wearable devices, but also to generate spatial metrics that are critically important to positions like cornerback, wide receivers, free safeties, right? And so we're able to track spatial metrics in addition to the speed, acceleration, change of direction metrics that the fans typically see. And so what we do with that data is we roll all of that data up into a proprietary scoring model. It's on a 100-point scale. And then depending on where the athlete falls on that 100-point scale determines how we project that player to the next level, be it high school to college or college to the NFL.
Yeah, so you're able to use this at all levels because, again, if you have the video, then you are able to generate the data. I love the idea. It means you don't need to have the little GPS tracking device in the shoulder pads of whoever's playing in whatever game you're interested in. The data is there. It's something that you're able to generate just on the video alone, which I find fascinating.
Absolutely. And so without the need for wearable devices, we're able to perform retrospective analysis on players who have had success at the highest levels, right? And that's what we use to actually train our scoring model. So we start with the answer in mind, and then we work backwards, right? And so we've been able to track players all the way back to 12, almost 15 years ago in order to be able to understand the functional movement of these athletes that were just tremendous football players, because that's a sport that we focus on right now, but were tremendous football players from the past.
I love that. So, and you can tell, right, not only the miles per hour that a player is reaching in a game situation with the pads on, right? So for me, somebody who's really invested in the combine, which is great, and it's its own set of data and it's usable. Understanding how fast a player can be in a real game situation, I would argue is more important. So you can get those miles per hour. You can also, it looks like you can see how quickly a player is accelerating to get to that top speed. Right. And I would love to ask you, Cory, just based on what you just said, you have all of these historical examples that you can reference back to to then look at sort of the new age player and say, wow, this guy, reached the same speed as player X, and player X is going to be a Hall of Famer soon. So can you tell us, if you can, whatever you can share with us, some of the numbers that might be associated with some of these great players that you've studied in the past?
Yeah. So if you think about some of the great players in the past, it's some of the things that are intuitive, like play speed, how fast that player is running. And that's why the 40-yard dash is, in the past, has been really the only proxy that was available, 10 years ago for scouts and evaluators to lean on to try to project how fast that player would play on Saturday or Sunday. And so what we're able to do is we're able to take that guesswork out. We're going to tell you exactly how fast this player is running. And so we know that max speed is definitely a variable that is predictive as it relates to success on Sundays. But then we also take it a step further, and you think about players like a Cooper Kupp, right, who most probably will not describe him as elite speed. But don't get me wrong, he can run. But what he does really well, and what we've learned through our research, is that athletes that don't necessarily have the requisite speed, they have other traits that matter, right, in the context of the game, things like yards of separation, right? And so before we came to market in 2020, we spent over 150 hours interviewing coaches, personnel executives, and talked about the things that they look for when they're studying tape, because tape is king. And so all we're doing is quantifying what coaches and evaluators are looking for when they're evaluating players on tape. So we're quantifying things like, how long did it take him to get to his max speed, right? So that's going to be a function of his acceleration or short area burst. When we talk to defensive back coaches, they talk a lot about how fluid his hips are. Well, you know what? We're going to quantify that in terms of our transition time. How quickly can he get in and out of his break? And so we, again, curate all of that data into our scoring model. Our scoring model is what we call our in-game athleticism score, or for short, IGA score. And again, that's what we're using to project players to the next level.
And it is really fun to see some of these videos. If you follow Cory, he's at Cory RA Analytics, or if you follow RA Analytics, you'll see some of these videos, and you can watch a corner who's in his back pedal stop, transition, move in a different direction, and you can quantify how quickly that happens. And here in New England, we know that for Bill Belichick's cornerbacks, he needs those guys. He needs their feet to be great. And that sounds like something a scout would say, right? He's got great feet. Well, now I can associate a number with that scouting phrase that somebody in the Patriots personnel department would use. And I could say, well, it took him X number of hundredths of a second to go from moving north to moving south, which again, I find tremendous. And there's a player, Cory, that I wanted to ask you about specifically, because I find his example and how it marries up with your company to be really interesting, because you mentioned next gen stats. That's obviously guys that are already in the NFL. We can track how they're moving on the football field. There has been a movement, it feels like, especially in the Power 5 conferences at the college level, that you can get some of these GPS numbers from these schools now, right? They're not publicly available as far as I know. They're not available to me and other media members. But it sounds like there are numbers that are now funneling to the pro level. Hey, this guy is a 22 mile an hour guy at his top speed, and they're tracking these things at practice and maybe even in games. I'm not 100% sure, Cory. But at Sacramento State, are they tracking the GPS stuff at Sacramento State? They might be. I doubt it. So for Marte Mapu, 3rd round pick for the Patriots, number 76 overall, I would think your company would be able to provide a lot of valuable insight on a player who is playing against guys that aren't, generally speaking, going to be in the NFL. And so instead of trying to gauge, wow, this guy flies on film, instead of me looking at that and saying, well, yeah, he's in the big sky, Cory, you could say, well, he's flying around, and I can tell you exactly how fast he's moving and how quickly he's changing direction. What do you know about Marte Mapu? Because I know this is a player that you've seen, and what does the data tell you about Marte and why he might be a good fit for the Patriots in the NFL?
I think he's an excellent pick. And so we're big believers in film plus data is going to actually help improve your hit rate. So when we talk to our clients about, our data and our scores, we also tell them you have to marry this with the institutional knowledge that your scouting department has, because it's extremely valuable, and you need to pair the two, film and the data. And so when it comes to Marty Mapu, first of all, I had an opportunity to live scout the kid at the NFLPA Collegiate Bowl in January. And let me tell you, he passed the eye test. I mean, he was one of the first guys that I saw, actually the first guy that I saw on the field that passed the eye test. He's big, he's long, right? And he's rangy. And so that was kind of just the eye test. But then when we peeled the onion back and looked at his data, right, it corroborated exactly what I saw. First of all, we topped him out at a 19.9 miles per hour max speed in the context of a game. Now, I can't speak for Sacramento State, but I do know the major college football programs that we do work with, they're all at the Power 5 level. They do have tracking data on their players, right? But they leverage our data because we go a little bit deeper than kind of what they collect today. And then we're also providing them with advanced scouting metrics, which is a whole separate subject. But at Sacramento State, at the FCS level, generally speaking, FCS schools do not have tracking data on their own players. At least, so my son's an FCS player, and his institution does not. But we're able to track Marte at 19.9. But more importantly, we can put that into context, because you go, 19.9, is that really fast? The answer is yes. So 19.9 for a linebacker, that's in the 83rd percentile of over 15,000 players that we have in our database, right? And then at safety, it drops down a little bit. It drops down to the 79th percentile, but that's still in the top quartile. And so, first of all, not only is he long, has a great frame where he can add weight if need be, but he's also fast, right? He's also relatively fast. And so when you combine his size and his speed, we know that he's an explosive player as well. So we also track what we call max or peak momentum force. So this is, when he gets to the ball carrier, how much momentum and force is he generating? And he's in the top quartile for that as well. So he's an explosive player, and you actually see that when you turn the tape on as well.
And Cory, are you finding that pro teams are more interested in this kind of data from some of these smaller school guys because the level of competition thing, I know, especially here in New England, they want to see guys that they draft compete against the best of the best. And they had the opportunity to do that with Marte at the Senior Bowl, the NFLPA Bowl.
Right.
Those are all-star games where they get a better sense of what he can be against top-end competition. But it's still hard, and those are still relatively small sample sizes. Even with Kyle Duggar, and this worked out great for them, but a Division II pick, he really started to take off, it's my understanding, in the Patriots' eyes after he had a great few days at Senior Bowl practice. But is this something that NFL teams are leveraging more? I know just from doing a little bit of research on your company and your website that, this is your technology is something that NFL scouts are using already. Are you finding that, especially with these smaller school guys, it's relevant for them?
Yeah. So definitely wanting to, so what our data helps these scouts with is the nuance of how do I stack my board relative to small school prospects, because they're not playing against the SEC competition week in and week out, right? And then if you're lucky, you're going to have a small school prospect who may play, if he's an FCS player, he may have played, a total of 4 games throughout his 4-year career against a Power 5 school. So how do I calibrate what I'm seeing on tape in terms of the things, the critical factors that I'm looking for, speed, athleticism, etc. How do I corroborate what I'm seeing? And that's where we kind of help fill the gaps. So we're able to provide them the raw number, right, in terms of the speed, acceleration, change of direction, or position-specific metric that we're tracking, and then provide them context to say, here's how this ranks. Here's how this number stacks from a percentile standpoint, again, across over 15,000 players in our database.
You're all over so many players, Cory, and Marte was really the one that I wanted to ask you about specifically. But are there any others from the Patriots draft class that stand out to you based on your data that are players that were real stars according to the numbers that you're able to generate and that may end up in Foxborough? You know, their top 2 picks, I think, were guys that a lot of people saw as first round picks. Christian Gonzalez from Oregon and Keon White from Georgia Tech. Did the data that you guys were able to generate at Real Analytics, did they speak similarly in terms of how they viewed these players compared to, you know, the traditional media and traditional scouting? Right. And say, hey, this is a top 30 player for us. Did the numbers say the same for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Gonzalez kid, he was kind of for us, he scored really high in terms of his IGA score, really high, being 90 plus. And that's elite. And so we think that, you know, he's I hesitate to say can't miss, because you know what we do not measure are the intangible assets. But athletically, he's going to be a good fit for Foxborough. I'm a Cowboy fan, so it pains me to say that. And then you think about, like, we talked a little bit about Marte, right? Small school prospect, but boy, do I think he offers excellent value. He's a versatile chess piece, right? So he's going to be Bill Belichick's chess piece. You know, probably takes a year or 2 to develop, I would think. But I think the upside potential, and based on his athleticism scores, are just through the roof, right? I know at Sacramento State, he played at all 3 levels, you know, from edge rusher to linebacker to even safety, right? So I think at the next level, he's going to play, you know, at that second level primarily. But again, he has that versatility that allows defenses to be able to use him as a chess piece to match up well week in and week out, depending on the matchup and what they're looking to do scheme wise.
And if he has that, you know, you said it, but it sounds like he has the frame to fill out and really play a linebacker role at the next level. The Patriots have said they want to get faster in that space. He's basically a 20-mile-an-hour guy on the field at that second level. Right. That's really, really fast, especially for the Patriots. And so you want to get more athletic at the second level. You may have to find him at Sacramento State. You may have to find him at the FCS level, but because you have some of this data and you have these all-star games to compare him against, this guy's a real athlete. Doesn't matter where he went to school. The numbers clearly say that.
And one of the things that he does really well that showed up in our numbers is his ability to play in space. And what do I mean by that? So when we look at his transition time, I mean, that was under half a second in terms of him transitioning in and out of his breaks, which really bodes well and speaks to his ability to play, you know, on the back end of a defense. But if he's playing at that second level, that's going to afford defenses the opportunity to leverage him in space, you know, to match up with the tight end. I do think that, and now this is a subjective observation, I do think that he has an opportunity to improve in terms of his coverage awareness and route recognition. But athletically, he's I mean, again, his upside is just tremendous.
Well, Cory, it's been great to learn about Real Analytics, to learn a little bit more about Marte Mapu. Again, we talk about these prospects so much, and we talk a lot about Keon White before the draft. We talked a lot about Christian Gonzalez before the draft. We didn't talk a whole lot about Marte Mapu before the draft, but having you on here with us for Next Pats gives us that context that we need to be able to envision what his role might be for the Patriots at the next level. So thanks so much for spending a few minutes here with us, Cory. Please, listeners, go follow Cory on Twitter at Cory RA Analytics, and go follow RA Analytics as well. The clips, again, are really valuable, and it's wild to be able to watch the numbers and just how this, the AI that you're saying really is sort of powering how you come up with this data works and functions. Again, you'll see high school clips on their Twitter pages. You'll see college clips. It's fascinating stuff. So thanks for breaking it down for us here at Next Pats, Cory. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Phil. Thanks for having me.
All right. Great stuff there from Cory. You know, it's just fascinating to see how technology and AI, even in this instance, is able to change how the game is played, change how scouting works. In some ways, it's a tool to augment how scouting works. And he said that he's not looking to replace anybody in terms of what their jobs are at the NFL level or any other level. Recruiting coordinators, coaches, it's to help you out. It's to make you more efficient. It's to say, this is what you care about. Oh, okay. I now have a number for that. At linebacker, you care about the ability to diagnose and get to the ball carrier. I can tell you how fast off the ball linebackers are doing that. You care about first contact for an edge defender and how quickly he's able to establish that with an offensive tackle. I have the ability to tell you how that guy accelerates off the line of scrimmage and establishes that first contact. How quickly does a cornerback close space at the top of a route? I can tell you that as well, down to the 100th of a second, or maybe even more specifically than that. I think that sort of information is really, really valuable. And again, for somebody like Mapu, not only did he play at a lower level, and so you can stack his numbers up against guys from Power 5 conferences and historical comps, guys that made it to the NFL and had success at the NFL. Not only can you do that, but you can use those numbers in a year where Mapu wasn't able to test. He tore his pec at the Senior Bowl, got hurt in the second day of practice at the Senior Bowl. So he'd already established that he could run with the big boys for a couple days down in Mobile, Alabama, but with no test numbers, with no 40 time, with no vertical, you can go to something like Real Analytics and have Cory and his team put something together, a Marte Mapu, that gives you a sense of how straight line fast this guy is, what his 40 time might have been, where it stacks up with other guys who ran in the 4.4s, for instance, at 220 pounds, if that's the kind of athlete Mapu is, and I think he is. But we don't have that 40 number. We have these other numbers. So if it can complete the picture athletically in terms of what you want, what you're looking for at that position and others, Real Analytics providing some real value there. Okay, so thanks again to Cory. Thanks to all of you for contributing to the mailbag, for listening this long. Marathon podcast coming off the draft. But we got a lot to share, and it's been a lot of fun sharing it with you. Keep an eye out for our next Pats episode. We have a couple of great guests lined up. We're just trying to figure out how to space out all these pods. We want to make sure that we have you guys covered for a long, long time this offseason. But we're going to have Mike Lombardi on the podcast. We're going to have Jim Nagy on the podcast, executive director of the Senior Bowl. So some great guests. We'll have many, many more that can tell us more about these Patriots draft picks. Keep an eye out for those. We'll talk to you very soon.